Welcome to the Faded Spade Podcast with your hosts, Tom Wheaton and Sean McCormack.
All right, we are back for pilot episode number 2 of the Faded Spade Podcast. I'm Tom Wheaton, founder and CEO of Faded Spade, and we have Mr. Sean McCormack back with us, the co-host, the poker boss, Director of Poker Operations Extraordinaire, and we are bringing you the second pilot. How you doing, Sean? What's new, bud?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, it's still getting back into the swing of things post-summer. You know, it slows down so much that it's like, you know, you just have to kind of flip the script and remember what it was like pre-Las Vegas summer poker time. So, you know, mainly getting ready to go on vacation. I'm actually headed up to Sacramento in 2 days.
But I see you actually had some time to clean the office up. So nice work, man. It looks good. Starting to look like a semi-professional podcaster. Not that either of us are.
Kudos to my wife. She saw those words that were on the wall and she was looking at the video and she was like, that you can't really see it. So it just looks like a splotch on the wall or something like that. It was a really inspirational quote that's now gone, and I have no clue what it said. But, you know, thanks to my wife, you know, the good doctor, putting in work, cleaning up our office.
And thanks to my great wife, the kids are in a room 3 or 4 doors down, so hopefully we won't have any screaming kids running in here. That would be funny, though.
Sick brag. You got like 4 doors down in your house. Nice house, buddy.
Just whatever. That's a humble brag, I guess. I don't know.
Humble brag.
Don't worry. If you saw the house, you wouldn't say that. So, all right, listeners, viewers, I think as everyone knows, we are on YouTube, the Faded Spade YouTube channel, and a variety of different podcast outlets. So last week, if you haven't seen the episode, check it out. You get a feeling for what we're trying to do here. Each week is going to be anchored by an interview with a special guest, either a industry leader or a industry entrepreneur. I interviewed Sean last week from a career leadership standpoint. Check it out. There's some really cool nuggets of information, and you get to know the man behind the poker boss. Today, Sean wants a role reversal and interview me. This way you guys get to know us as your hosts before we start bringing on guests over the coming weeks. And then we're going to stick with our same segments. So on the clock segment and the grind segment. All right. So let's jump into it, man. You ready for some on the clock?
Let's do this.
Let's do this. All right, Sean, I know you have a topic you want to discuss and debate. Again, remember, On the Clock is all about debating a certain topic. What is that topic, Sean?
Well, we hear a lot in the poker industry about how, you know, players that win big tournaments, especially like WSOP main or even the Triton Millions, the biggest tournament they're about to do, the biggest tournament ever. You know, we got guys all over the world winning just massive events. And obviously when you win that type of money, not only do you get the media coverage, but you get the social media coverage and you get the fan base. And the question a lot of people have is, do big winners, do the John Sins of the world and, like the newer poker champions, do they owe the poker community, you know, giving something back, you know, making sure that the game continues to grow, being an ambassador for the game? Do they owe us, not specifically us too, but do they owe the poker community and the poker industry that giving back? And honestly, it's a toss-up for me. What do you think about it first? You chime in.
You're putting me on the spot. Okay, yeah, So this is a question I feel pretty strongly about, and it's because I kind of look at this cross-industry. So I think the answer is yes. I think that, and I'm going to be real specific with what I say here, because I don't think every champion or et cetera has any type of obligation or responsibility to be an ambassador, right? But I think those who work hard to kind of make themselves an influencer in the game, many of those are past champions, right? Maybe a small percentage of past champions, but there are those that work to become an influencer in the game, right? That kind of build their personal brand. Or players that maybe they're not champions, but they're influencers, right? And they put themselves out there and they almost represent the industry without officially representing the industry. I think the answer for that is yes. I think there is a responsibility to represent the industry in a positive way and do our part or their part to move it forward in a positive way. I know that's not a popular opinion, right? I know this isn't a team sport. I know there aren't contracts, but I think when someone has that type of influence and it's maybe self-made by design, right? Or something they try and do and try and grow, I think it's there. I equate it almost to like PGA golfers, right? Like if you're a PGA golfer and you're on the tour and let's say you win, they stay out of the limelight, right? And they go back to their business and you don't hear from them much. But there are others that you hear a lot from and they become characters within their game. And I think they have a responsibility because they put themselves out there to kind of uphold the integrity of the game and be almost like an ambassador. But I think it's a choice, right? The folks who want that limelight, who want that notoriety, or even just get it, maybe they don't want it. If they continue to build themselves up in that light, I really think it's a responsibility to represent in a positive way, even though there aren't contracts or et cetera. But I think it's for the good of the industry as a whole. So that's kind of my opinion. And I think there is a difference between champions and influencers and champions who just kind of stay out of the limelight and do their thing. But I mean, if you're gonna put yourself out there and build that private brand and et cetera, I feel like there's a responsibility that comes along with it, man.
So I totally understand where you're coming from. And I won't say I'm the exact opposite because I'm not. I'm somewhere in the middle. Obviously, when it comes to people in the industry who work for the industry, myself, yourself, leaders in our industry who get a paycheck, obviously we have a standard, a minimum standard to uphold. And even further than that, some of us have a responsibility to grow the game. And it's, just taking out the fact that it's advantageous for us to grow the game. Obviously, there's real world dollars and cents for me to grow the game in my community. There's real world dollars and cents for you to grow the game globally. So from that aspect, I completely agree. Now, are there players that win big events that just fade away? Hell, I mean, take the last 10 World Series of Poker main event champions. How many can you name in the last 10 that aren't the current last 2?
Right.
Go ahead. I'll wait. A lot of them have faded off, and some of them haven't. Ryan Reese, the Beast. He's a good guy to name because he is always positive on social media. I'm not sure exactly how much he won, maybe 7-8 million or something like that. A young kid from Michigan, and he's always highlighting the positive things in his life and the positive things poker has done for his life and such. So that's awesome. But then you take other guys, and I'm not saying this negatively because I actually agree with him. Take a guy like Joe McKeon.
Right.
Within the last 10 years, he won the World Series of Poker, and he's a guy that his Twitter account is private, which is like, first and foremost, like boom, like crazy. Like he has to accept everybody that he wants to follow him. And that's just, he came up in a different way. It's not to say that is, I think that's his choice.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's in a negative way. I think poker is very different than comparing to the PGA or NBA or NFL and stuff like that, where these guys do have contracts. And I know you spoke to that point, but they're being paid. And they officially work for an organization. Tom Brady works for the New England Patriots. At the end of the day, Robert Kraft signs Tom Brady. That's the way it worked. No one signs Joe McKeon. No one signs Johnson and stuff like that. Now, if they sign contracts, like the huge names in the industry have, the Phil Hellmuths, the Daniel Negreanos and stuff like that of the world, yes, they owe something because they put that on paper. They sign an ethics clause or a "you won't make us look bad" clause or whatever way the company wants to state it. And we've already seen that because there are things, a big thing, and I don't know enough about this to talk on the subject, but Daniel Negreanu just put out a pretty controversial post about using a VPN to log into like PokerStars and Party Poker and stuff like that from the US, which we know is against the terms and conditions. But is it cheating? And I don't know enough on the subject to say whether it's cheating or not. Obviously, that person doesn't have a poker advantage over anybody else, but you abide by the rules when you play on a site. You're saying you won't do these things. So technically a lot is illegal. No. Is it probably unethical? Probably.
Right.
But stuff like that, back to what we're talking about, Daniel couldn't talk about that when he worked for PokerStars. He clearly, and he mentioned that himself. It's not like this is some big secret. He said, I couldn't mention this when I worked for PokerStars. So, it's something that he possibly owed us in the past was more contractual obligation, more so than I actually owe the community this perceived ambassadorship or something like that. He was an ambassador because PokerStars told him he needed to be. So it's an interesting topic. I don't think anybody is right. Anybody is wrong in this scenario. I can tell you this, if I ever won $10 million in a poker tournament or anything like that, I'd be everywhere. I'd be on Wheaties boxes if I could. I'd be the
I don't doubt that.
Face. What's that?
I don't doubt that.
I'd dive right in. I'd eat it up as much as I could for as long as I could. But sometimes that doesn't play into people's wheelhouses, and we have to accept that. Not everybody is built to be in front of the camera 24 hours a day, like the Lynn Gilmartins of the world, the Vince Van Pattens of the world. These guys were trained to do what they do and be so eloquent and great at what they do. I wish I could do it on their level. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. We just have to accept when people are just like, no, I don't want the camera in my face.
And I think that's a good point, right? And I think there's a difference between owing the industry and then having a responsibility, right? So like you use Joe as an example. I don't think Joe owes the industry or has a responsibility at all because he doesn't put himself out there, right? That's his choice. Now, if it's someone else who puts themselves out there a lot and is trying to grow their personal brand and opens himself up to the world as a champion, I think then there's a responsibility. Do I think they owe? I don't think they owe, but I think there's a responsibility. And that's why I have so much respect for guys like Negreanu and Helmuth and others, right? And obviously we talked about Moneymaker. And I think even Sin and then Scott Blumstein for his reign, like they put themselves out there a little bit, but then they really they showed up and they talked about the industry and where we could go. And they showed up on different programs and they kind of catered to the fans. And I think like they felt a little bit of a responsibility and then they kind of capitalized on it. And I think that's great. Right. So for me, it's only when you kind of put yourself out there and then don't represent the industry well, where I think it's a little bit of a burden. The other point is you're right. We don't have yet sponsorships like some PGA players or NASCAR drivers or et cetera. But I think it's going to take us in this industry and a core group of people, which I know we'll talk a bit more later. Like if we want that, we've got to kind of act like we want it a little bit. So the other point is, I think if we ever want to be like where NASCAR is or PGA is, where there are sponsorships, like I think we kind of got to act the part a little bit, right? And have that represent the industry kind of manner. Because I only think those types of things come if we act like it and do things strategically to want it. No, any champ that doesn't put themselves out there, I think you're right. Nobody owes anything to anybody. But I do think for those that do put themselves out there, I think there is a responsibility for the industry.
And I think this will open the door to another conversation we might want to throw on a podcast another time, is we need to start embracing what is truly happening in the poker world. For one, staking. Oh my God, why is this still in 2019 like a conversation we can't have? Everybody should know at this point that everybody's being staked.
I do.
Yeah.
U-Stake. I play all my big tournaments through U-Stake. I'm proud of it.
You're not throwing 10K down. And I think players that are being staked probably owe a little bit more to the growth of the game. And I will give you all day long. I don't know if I've ever been staked in a poker tournament. Maybe one or two in my life, but I've definitely been staked in like cash games and stuff like that. People like come up to me more. It's more for fun for them, like a little sweat, more so than staking. Like, hey, let me. You're playing that game. Let me get a couple $100 down. You know what I mean? 5% of your action, whatever. I'm like, I'll do it for fun with buddies and stuff like that. But we all have to know at this point in these huge, huge tournaments that staking is happening. There was just some big, huge blow up Poker News reported on. And I'm only mentioning it because he said it was all true, but they were working out something. And I actually, he gets a lot of flack, Maurice Hawkins. And, there was a big, I guess, a guy from North Carolina, business owner or something, staked him in a whole bunch of circuit events, and he owed him in the tune of like $100,000. Do not quote me. I don't know the full story. But, he came out as we're working on it and this and that. And this, people look at it, it's like the ugly side of poker. No, it's the part that keeps it going. It's no different than, do people think that the NFL just keeps going without sponsorships, that, Nike and Adidas and Reebok and all these people? What's the difference if it's you on Stake Kings and someone takes half your action because they have a lot of money and they want to throw you in a tournament? When you go into that tournament, even if that person wants to remain anonymous, which is totally cool and totally the way it should remain, we should embrace that though. And you need to realize that you're representing that person because they staked you half the percent. You don't have to win and say, hey, Bobby from Montana gave me $5,000 to jump in this event. I want to thank Bobby, unless Bobby wants that, or, whatever name you want to use.
You're right. I mean, here's the thing, and I'll talk from personal experience. There's nothing to be ashamed about regarding staking. And I don't know why folks maybe even feel like there should be. I love how you stake and others are bringing it out into the limelight. It's something that should be celebrated. And a lot of times there are great investment opportunities for people, or it's just about engagement for fans of some of our poker, celebrities or influencers. And I think that's great. When I did my first U stake for the Aria tournament, there were 32 backers. Some chose to be anonymous. Some proudly put their name out there. But you're right. There was a feeling for me, I'm representing this group, Team Faded Spade, and I really want to do well for them. And when we did, it was such an awesome feeling. And then the flip side, at the WSOP, I was staked by 30 some people and I didn't cash. And it was kind of a bad feeling because I wanted to for them. But I'm never playing in that tournament for 10K, right? Maybe 33% is what I'd be able to do. And then it's part about, hey, look, I've had some tournament success. It's so far a good investment for people, but it's more about engagement. I mean, it's more about building brand and fan base and giving people a sweat and fun. And I think it doesn't have to be just a 10K. It could be the $500 tournament or the $1,000 tournament. And you can get 20, 25, 30 backers. And I think that's awesome for the game because it brings more people into the game in an interactive way. So I agree. I don't know why people or why the industry or why people from the outside the industry might think there's any type of gray area about it. I think it's something that should be completely wide open. And I think something that should be celebrated, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of brings on another topic, which is kind of still gray, is chip chops. End of chops. It's I've worked with a multitude of different television companies and stuff like that. And I get it. There are some tournaments where, could you imagine the World Series of Poker main event down to 3 players and it's just anticlimactic by them going outside and making a deal, coming back and saying the tournament is over? I get that. Write that into your rules. Say that there are no end of tournament chip chops, that you still have to play for the money. But people have to realize, even events that size, people are making deals. People are 100% making deals. I won't say that it happened this year. From what I hear through the grapevine, it didn't happen. And maybe because it is the World Series and it's you go 4 million, 6 million, 10 million for first, second, third. It's a huge amount of money, but these guys already have, made it further than any of us could ever dream. But tournaments happen all the time. And I actually remember, I won't mention the tour or where it was, but I remember one time, this is way, way back in the day, players were told there are no chip chops. You can't do it. You must play it out. And it was on TV. And all they had to do is tell them, sure, we'll assist with the chip chop, but you still have to play it out. Play for the title. And what happened was they told them absolutely not, put their foot down, this is the players' money. They have to realize that we don't really get that big of a choice. Now, there are jurisdictions where the government tells you you cannot do it because of tax implications, stuff like that. I get that. They're still going to do things outside of your purview, for sure. But when you put a hard no on that, what they did was they went out, they took an unscheduled break, they went outside, and guess how many hands that tournament lasted when they came back?
One.
One. And they probably talked about making it look good or something like that, which is terrible again. It's just fake, because the people that know, and when that gets leaked out, it's even worse for the industry. It's even worse for the growth of the industry. They just happen to get lucky that I think one guy had ace queen, one guy had ace 10 on the first hand, which aren't hands, that's for the ace 10, that's ICM explosion, just to say, let me just put it all in. Because it went like raise all in call. It was so obvious with like 180 big blinds effective stack. So it wasn't going to happen that way. It all went in pre-flop, ace queen one, and it was over. It was so bad. And we need to get away from that. And the tours, the operators, and everybody else need to embrace the fact that and I think it's getting better. We 100% do it where I work, and, we embrace it, but there are spots we don't want super high rollable to end with, oh, it's just over. You go from 4 players to over. I always joke that I can't wait for the day for, these events that try to come back, even the World Series main event. This would be awful. I say it in jest, but you get a 4-way all in and you go from 4 to 1 winner. Ooh. When you're supposed to come back the next day to play again from 3 to 1. You know what I mean? It would be pretty insane for that to happen. But there was a tour in Europe where that actually happened. We had a 4-way all in for like $1 million up top, and 4 players got it in, and somehow the best hand kings held, or whatever it was. This was years ago, but
I'm loving this on the clock segment. I mean, oh God, I'm gonna put that in slow motion, and that's gonna be a clip.
That's a gift, baby. That's a gift.
Yeah,
it's a gift and a gift.
No, I mean, a gift you return.
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, look, we've had some cool topics here, and we weren't even planning on it. We talked about ambassadorship and responsibility.
We talked about chip chops.
Chip chops, right? And then we've talked about staking. And I think the thing with staking and chip chops, I think the message there is like transparency, right? Like we don't have anything to be ashamed of. The industry has nothing to be ashamed of. So let's just make it transparent and embrace it. And I think what I'm starting to think about, Sean, for these on the clocks is, yeah, you and I do a pretty cool job like discussing the topic and showing different perspectives, but the ones that are really like industry wide, I think we invite different players on, or different influencers, like 5 or 6 people, and just debate it and hear all opinions, not just ours. And I think that's like really great content for fans, for people in the industry, you name it. I think maybe we start doing that down the road too.
Yeah, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get our round tables going.
Yeah, done, baby. On the clock, wrap up. So let's go over to our next segment, the grind. And remember, the grind is more like, hey, these are some recent things that have been happening in the industry. What are our thoughts on them? Not necessarily debating them, but kind of highlighting them for viewers who may not know the discussions are happening. And the one I wrote down and actually got involved in from a conversation standpoint was this whole kind of discussion on Twitter between D-Negs and Berkey, Joey, and a few others talking about poker entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I love this topic. I'm sure we're going to talk about it when Berkey's on the podcast next time, in addition to his entrepreneurial interview for Solve for Why. But this is all about past poker entertainment, present poker entertainment on TV, and like what people want to watch and what drives ratings and what's better for the industry, and players being characters and all this type of stuff. If you haven't checked it out, go on Twitter, look at Berkey and D-Neg's accounts, follow the thread, because it's really interesting discussion. And I think this is a discussion that needs to continue because poker has evolved, right? It is less character driven because there's so much money on the line. I think because the game has evolved, players have evolved. There is much more of a quote unquote robotic way to play, even though I wouldn't use that term. I've heard it, like a robotic way to play. So it might be less entertaining in terms of like outbursts and emotion at a table, but those who like are really turning in for like true strategy and things like that, it's just a different level of like, I guess, engagement and watching. But I think that we need another evolution of poker entertainment. And I really believe if a few core group of people come together in the industry, and I mean, on Twitter, I was like, heck, I'll help be a business leader that helps galvanize it because I believe in it so much. Like, there's got to be this evolution of WWE, UFC storyline kind of between players that is scripted, but then leads to like real poker. And then you got to mix things into the game that are almost like game show oriented that make people uncomfortable. But it's a whole evolution, and it's a complete game changer. But if we do something like that, and there is a core group that could do it, truly embrace it like that half scripted but real poker, adding a whole bunch of creative entertainment to the gameplay, that I think is what could lead to the next poker evolution. That is what I think could lead to the things we were talking about, like player sponsorship. But it's going to take a lot of sacrifice from a lot of notable people in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of planning to do it. It's not impossible. I think it can happen. I'm happy to help lead the charge in some way just because of the passion for it. But I think it's an important topic. I think it's only going to become more, not debated, but discussed. I mean, so yeah, I think for our listeners and viewers, check that whole discussion out. I think it's really interesting. You know, what about you, Sean? What do you think about the whole poker entertainment landscape?
So obviously we took a huge turn, a wrong turn, so to speak, when Black Friday hit, obviously with, sponsorship dollars and, these big online poker sites that were able to just throw just millions and millions and millions of dollars at growing the game, growing their personalities, growing their player base and stuff like that. It's really tough. And, I am all ears and I am willing and able to stay on the front line and help this. But I'm going to be honest, as an industry, operator, I don't know what the next evolution is. And it's going to take smarter minds than us to figure this out. Guys that have been in the industry, not just the old school guys, but the new school guys. And I think, just throwing it out there, I think the next evolution might be similar to esports. It might be Twitch.
Oh yeah.
The only way to engage the masses is to get on a platform that reaches the masses. And something like Twitch, I mean, what these kids do online now, they playing the Fortnite. I just read a story today. Some kid in, I think it was Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or something, won the Fortnite championship and they gave him $3 million. Like, he looked like he was 16 years old. I was like, I mean, like, going to school means something different than it did when I was,
Amen to that.
Yeah, he's taking kids to school now on these games, and maybe that's our next evolution. But it's really hard to one-to-one compare esports to poker, because poker is still considered by the majority of people as gambling. And that's a huge roadblock. Hell, you got, and this is gambling, but you got sports betting legal in more states now than online poker, which is crazy because one is, yes, you can get your information and you can do your research and stuff like that. But poker is supposed to be a skill-based game at the end of the day. Yeah, they're not calling me for my end game theories on how to play pocket tens under the gun +1 when there's a raise in front. See, I don't even know what I'm talking
Just jam and hope for the best. So this is cool. So I mean, these topics are some great topics we're talking about, and I think you're right. I think we have some roundtables about these, and we spend 45 minutes with a number of different people other than just us talking about this. Because look, things can actually come out of that. These types of roundtables, if we have the right people on, and then they can actually come out of these roundtables and go have discussions and try and move these types of things forward, that's a great thing for our industry.
Yeah, it branches out, and that's the hope of all this, is that we can reach people that have influence in the industry, even more so than us, of course, and they can branch out and give their thoughts. And it's all going to come down to getting that middle ground. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to turn this into a debate that goes nowhere. We want to find middle ground. And to do that, people are going to have to give a little bit on their side, whilst the other people on the other side give a little bit, and hopefully come together in the middle for the growth of the game. And that's where your real ambassadors are really going to stick out and say, hey, I feel real strongly about this, but I'm willing to give up a little bit for the overall growth of the game. And I've definitely swallowed my pride on a lot of things and said, you know what, maybe that worked in 2003 and it no longer works and we need to move forward. And, there's a lot of traditionalists in our industry, and they're going to need to get on board too with a lot of these changes and stuff like that. And listen to the next generation. I know a lot of people have reservations to that, but honestly, you got to listen to, you can't just blow them off like, these young kids don't know what they're talking about. Of course they do. There are kids right now, and I say kids because I'm 40, but there are young, up and comers in the game that are 22, 23, 24. And I look back when I was that age and was like, wow, these guys are focused. Mm-hmm. They've come along, and technology has kind of pushed them that way, which is awesome for them. But when I was 22, 23, all I was thinking about was how much cash I had in my pocket for that day to go play the next game. And that's just not the game anymore. The game has evolved, and we have to figure out how to use that evolution to grow the game further. So we'll see.
So I think that's a good transition to, who one of our guests is going to be in the next few episodes, and that's Jason Somerville, right? And what he's done with Run It Up. And I mean, the guy, I think he just turned 30, right? And he's built this unbelievable organization, and he's an ambassador for the game. And I believe he almost created what we know as Twitch poker, right? I mean, he pretty much created the market. So I can't wait to hear his story. I think that's going to be great for viewers and listeners as well.
Yeah, and he's like the middle ground guy. He's not the old guard. He's not the super young guard. Granted, I think he would lean more towards the younger guard.
Yeah.
And I think he has a lot of influence. Guys like that are the guys that, that they know the old school ways, but they also understand the Twitch market and stuff like that to bring in this next generation. Because without looking to the next generation, we can't move forward. Because guys like us, I mean, we're a little bit more veterans of the game and more, like along in the game in our careers. Don't look at me.
I hate hearing that. Like, you got new school. You got new school.
We're not the young guns anymore, buddy. We're not the young guns. You got to let that one go.
You read me like a book. Oh,
God. But, yeah, I mean, we have to embrace these new guys and up-and-comers in the industry. And that's why, I try to, on a daily basis, I treat the 20-somethings, 30-somethings, the 40-somethings, and beyond. I try to treat them the same way. Yes, I have to talk to them a little bit differently. There's vernacular that I use with the 20-somethings that I won't use with the 50-somethings, stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that there's not a common ground. And a kid like Somerville, and I keep saying kid, but he might be the bridge to bring it all together. So I'm really looking forward to talking to him and really listen to his insight. So
no doubt. All right. So again, what we're going to do now is we're going to run into the Founder Hour interview segment. Last week we interviewed Sean in his Career Leader segment, which is still coming up with a name. And then the Founder Hour is for when we bring on like a couple future guests. Berkey, who started Solve for Why and that entrepreneurial journey. Jason, Run It Up and that entrepreneurial journey. And to kind of give you a little bit of a taste of what those interviews will be like, even though it will be the reverse of who's conducting them. Sean wanted to go through a similar interview with me about Faded Spade. And again, I don't want you guys to think this is like self-promotion for Sean or self-promotion for Faded Spade, which, okay, it kind of is a little bit. But we do want you guys to get to know us as our hosts a little bit deeper than what you already might know, or maybe you don't even know us. And then it'll give you a little taste for what's to come with some of the more notable influencers in the industry and career leaders in the industry that you do know.
Let's get to it. This was fun for me last week. And by fun, I mean, Tom was really giving it to me. No. It was really great to tell my story. And I'm really looking forward to hearing our host stories. So, Tom, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great, Sean.
Are you ready for all this?
I'm a little nervous for what questions you're going to ask, but it's all right. Shoot, give it away, man. Let's do this.
Come on.
This
I'll throw softball ones first for you.
Okay.
So, firstly, first and foremost, obviously, tell us who you are. Who is Tom Wheaton?
That's a loaded question, man. I'll give you like the highlights of just, I guess, from then till now. So I was born in New York, and then I moved to Jersey. I'm a Jersey guy, and small town Jersey. Grew up in an area that had like barns and cornfields and dairy cows and etc. But I was never really like a country kid. Like I was always that kid that wanted to play baseball and not like football and wrestling and play basketball. And I never hunted or fished or any of that kind of stuff. And then baseball was like my thing growing up. Basically I went to college for baseball. I learned that a good baseball player in New Jersey is average in Florida. I went to the national champions, University of Central Florida Knights, which is its own debate. And when I moved to Orlando from Jersey, it was one of those things where that was my life. Baseball, business, college, always knew I wanted to be like some kind of business person. And then after college, I wound up just jumping straight into my career. And it was like working for big corporations in marketing and communications and that type of thing. But when baseball was over, poker became that replacement. It became that like competitive thing that I did that I just like wanted to be really good at. And it became like my life through my 20s was growing in the corporate world and playing poker. And that's how we made a lot of friends. We had the home games every 3 or 4 nights. We ran tournaments, but that's me, man. Like just New York, born in New York, raised in Jersey. It was all about, baseball and business. And then poker came along and just kind of grabbed my attention, and it became a big part of who I am.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Like, is that okay? A good enough kind of overview? I don't know.
No, I think that's great. Except I don't think anybody would believe that any part of Jersey has cows, and it's fascinating. You think about the Northeast, and you think busy cities, and it's funny how much we actually have in like Jersey, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, states like that have a lot of just farmland and stuff like that. How it's very different than like a lot of people, when you say farmland, they think the Midwest. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on New Jersey and how it really is there. So it's not all gambling and city life. It's definitely a bit more. So let me ask you this: like you talk about getting into poker, and a lot of people talk about how poker is a replacement for something very competitive for them, whether it's a sport or, like I even hear a lot of guys that were like huge into like Wall Street and finance, and they go, I need something to kind of offset that. I can't fire on all cylinders on that all my life, whether it's sports because your knees go or you just get older and stuff like that. So poker became a passion of yours. But how did you get into like the entrepreneurial side? Like you built this Faded Spade brand, which 3-4 years ago, nobody knew who you were. And now you got companies from all over the world calling you, asking you about your product. So how did that happen?
A balance of planning and finally getting off my ass and doing something about it, and a lot of support from a lot of people. So the entrepreneurial bug has always been in my genes because my dad owned his own business, right? And my parents were divorced when I was like 10, but they were still both very positive role models in my life. Like my dad, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, a leadership standpoint, take the long way home, be your own man, be your own person. Any dream you have, you go for, right? And then my mom was the same exact way. But she raised 3 boys in a house on her own. And I learned leadership from that. And I learned work ethic, and I learned like patience, and I learned all these unbelievable qualities. And my parents instilled in me that I could do anything. And I still believe that. And that's the type of thing I think you need to take a risk into entrepreneurship. So then after like 15 years in the corporate world and a bunch of entrepreneurial endeavors that like failed along the way, like a clothing company and things like this and blah, blah, blah. Like I decided it was time to try and take my career and future in my own hands. And I always had this passion for poker and cards. And I believed, and this is 2012, Sean, where like I had the idea for Faded Spade. I locked up the trademarks. I locked up all the web properties. I believed like there needed to be a new poker card brand that specifically catered to poker. And I had this idea in 2012. But at that time, I wound up, fortunately I married a wonderful woman, my wife, Devin, who you've met. We've had an unbelievable family. We have 2 kids now. And from 2012 to 2017, like that was my life in addition to, and still my life, but in addition to a big, high paying, high stress corporate job. What happened was I wound up losing that job. And all of a sudden, and this was 2017, and it was, oh no, like, what do we do? My wife, God bless her, she has her own graphic design business. She does a bunch of really cool fitness stuff with Beachbody. So there's income there. But like my job was the job that supported the house and the family, and that was gone. And it was like, what now? And I remember you can either go 2 roads when that happens. You can fall apart and you can just let it affect you negatively, or you can like rise to the occasion and say, this is a new opportunity. What do I do? And I remember my wife looked at me and she said, stop talking about Faded Spade and just go for it. And that was 2017. And I did. But Sean, there was 5 years in between of having the idea and then actually getting butt in gear to do it. And I would say to any entrepreneur, an idea is great, a plan is great, but until you actually start taking baby steps to get something done, nothing is going to happen. So like, I know timing and great things, God's timing and all that is a big part of it. But like, if I could give any wisdom to any entrepreneur listening, like stop waiting, just start taking baby steps towards your vision. So a long-winded kind of explanation to your question.
Holy shit. That's some powerful stuff right there. I'm like pumped right now. I want to go like take over the world. Wow. Kudos to Devin for pushing you. We all know that our wives and our better halves definitely have a lot to do with, where we make it and having support, whether it's from family or friends and stuff like that, how huge that is. So that's fantastic, Tom.
There's a saying, Sean, that I'm going to kind of change now. And I really believe this. Like there's that saying, you've heard it, behind every strong man or successful man is a strong and successful woman, right? I think it's right next to any strong man or successful man is a equally or stronger successful, woman. And I think that is my example with Devin. I mean, she's one of the biggest supporters. And, if not for that support, I can't go to Vegas for 7 days and try and drum up some business. So yeah, big time.
So let's dive more into Tom the businessman. What are some of your pitfalls and along the way? I mean, obviously having children, having a family and stuff like that, those aren't pitfalls. That's just life. Right. And obviously you have to prioritize those things. But what were some of the true pitfalls to starting your own brand? I mean, it can't be easy.
No, it's very difficult. And I'm glad you brought that up about like the family and the kids, because that's priority 1, right? And then obviously marriage and relationships. And then priority 2 is Faded Spade. But to be honest, that takes up all the time. And if I'm not being the best dad I can be, or the best husband I can be, or not involved with Faded Spade as much as I am, then none of it works. So what happens is you lose touch with other things. Like you lose touch with friends. You don't keep in touch with family as much. And there are other sacrifices that happen to make all of those things like successful and balanced. But from a business standpoint, it was very difficult. I will share that before we found and built the RFID cards and now our poker room cards, there were probably 8 times of failure before we even launched the product of the company. And then when we launched the product in the company, even then the cards were good, but they weren't great. So we paused and we made them great. And now like I can truly say Faded Spade cards are the absolute best poker cards in the business, but it came through failure. I mean, at least 8 times. I think I counted 8. And I actually keep a box in my closet that I'm looking at now that has like all the different times we failed as a reminder of when I fail the next time, it's okay. You just got to keep pushing along. And I think a lot of businesses, like you read, like a lot of businesses fail within 3 or 5 years because of money or because of competition or et cetera. I can say, I think a lot of businesses also fail because the leader doesn't have thick enough skin to get through the failure, because it's hard. There's so many times I've wanted to quit, but it's like, you just got to keep pushing. So there have been many more failures than successes. And it's really hard to celebrate the successes when they do happen, because you're just trying to continue to push forward and make your company better and your brand better. But it's like, what I would say to other entrepreneurs is like, you're going to fail a lot, a whole lot. And you got to get ready to withstand those failures. And you, like Gary Vaynerchuk says, you got to eat shit, right? You're going to. And it's like, you've got to overcome that. And the only way you overcome that is through like strength and faith in yourself and the support, like family and friends. But you're going to fail. We've failed a ton, but you don't get to where we are today, like slowly making a positive impact without failing. Wow. So it's like, you just got to fight through it. Otherwise, Faded Spade could have closed its doors a year ago.
Wow. That's, again, more powerful stuff. Not only do you mention how much your wife has a strong presence in what you've done with your career and your business, but now you even mentioned Gary V. I mean, come on, man. No, that guy is super inspirational, and he's definitely a guy I look up to, and he's real.
I've never met him. Let's be real. I've never met him, but I have.
He's a Jets fan, right? Not a Giants fan.
I can't. That's why I can't meet him. I'm a Giants fan. But he literally was like, at the timing before doing this, listening to Crush It, his audiobooks, reading his books. Like, that was something that also pushed me over the edge to be like, look, enough of just living other people's dreams. Get after your own. Yeah. And it's been the most challenging thing I've done in my life. And it's nowhere close to being, we're nowhere close to having arrived. We've come a long way, don't get me wrong. But like, you've got to just keep pushing. It is a constant battle within yourself to just keep pushing forward and keep trying to reach new heights. Because once you just rest, like, someone else is going to beat you,
100%. They always say, work more hours, like the guy behind you is trying to work more hours than you, or however the quote goes, but it's so true. I listen to guys like, even like The Rock, who talk about, he says, a lot of people say you got to sleep X amount of hours. He only sleeps like 5 hours a day. I don't even know. I feel like that guy's a robot, because like he just keeps going. And then the next thing you know, he's on Instagram at 4 a.m. getting his second workout. And I'm like, dude, how do you do it? And it's just fascinating. And, a lot of like bodybuilder and strong guy types were always like inspirational to me. I'm not like the smallest guy ever. So I kind of like looking at those guys. You got guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who said, you don't sleep 8 hours, sleep faster in 5 hours, which is really funny, because you obviously can't sleep faster, but it just shows you that the human mind can do whatever you want it to do. You just have to tell it to go. You got to get off the couch. You got to get off the, whatever.
3 years, 3.5 years. I have literally no idea what hit shows are on TV. I hardly keep up with sports anymore. It's like pop culture. I couldn't even tell you who like the biggest artist is right now, because literally all my waking time outside of like my family and my kids is this. And that's what people have to be prepared for. Like, you have to put in that work. You have to sacrifice other things in your life, like TV or watching shows or this or that, to actually build. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. But you're right. Get off the couch. Just start doing something, anything. Even if you don't know what step to take in any direction, just take a step. Like, even if it's backwards, just start moving, start action towards some kind of vision.
So that's a good segue into my next question. What keeps Tom Wheaton going?
I don't know, man. I think it's just this internal drive, to just, I really believe in Faded Spade, and I really believe it can be like not just the poker card brand for choice, but I think it can eventually evolve into other things in poker, like digitally, or like we talked about entertainment wise. I really believe in this brand, and I believe in where we can take it and our product. But I'm going to give like a kind of an interesting answer to this because it just came to my heart and I want to share it. Like what also keeps me going is the support from the community. It really does. Like I had a feeling like this is going to work if the community wraps their arm around it, you know, like, and it all started with the World Poker Tour. And more importantly, it started with a person at the World Poker Tour, and that's David Gitter, their VP of marketing. David, I think, saw the vision for the company and believed enough in the vision. And this was around the time where all the card problems were going on with WSOP, mind you, right? So, and also the benefits for WPT. What David did for me is he gave me opportunity. And he put me in front of Adam Pliska at a breakfast with Warren, you know, Warren Woodall, he was there. And he gave me an opportunity to present what I was doing with or without WPT or anybody with Faded Spade and the why behind it. And after that breakfast, what was said to me in a nutshell was, if you do this, and if you prove you produce the best RFID cards in the market, and if you prove you can produce some of the best poker cards in the market, we will give you the opportunity to put them on the global stage. And my mind was blown. And we did it. And they then kept their word. And I feel like I don't work for them, but I think because they were the group that first helped give us a global stage and that opportunity, every entrepreneur needs that, man. Every business needs that. And that support from the WPT and other so many great players who have become customers and whatnot too. And then, you know, you even, Sean, like I remember the first time we met and we went through the cards at the Aria, you could have been like, peace out, another one of these, you know, gaming vendor companies. But you heard the story, I think you saw the passion, and you gave Faded Spade an opportunity to prove themselves at the Aria in some games and tournaments. And that type of support from the industry keeps me going, Sean, to continue to answer your question. Because if it wasn't there, I don't know that I would keep this going. You know what I'm saying? But it's there, and I think it'll continue to be there. And my hope is that it only gets stronger.
Good stuff. Good stuff, man. Yeah. You mentioned Gitter and WPT and even myself to some extent. And, you know, don't sell yourself short. We might've been a little bit of the spark, but you were the match, you know, and that's what that entrepreneurs really need to realize is that, yes, we're always going to thank people along the way, but you can't rest on your laurels and you have to keep pushing forward. So talking about moving forward, what would you tell someone who has a plan, but like they're stuck in mud, they're not moving forward? Like that's a really tough one. And I would say that's the point where 99% of everybody's game plan, they just throw it away and start anew or just give up completely. So I'm sure you've had that moment in your life where you felt like, man, why am I doing this? So what advice would you give to them to keep driving forward?
It's going to be different for different people, but that feeling of self-doubt, that feeling of I'm not good enough, no matter how confident you are, that feeling of like, is this real? Like, am I really going to be able to do this? It will come over and over and over again during your entrepreneurial journey. It will come before you get the support of people, because every entrepreneur needs support. After you get the support of people, like, so here's how I overcome it. And I think anyone watching or listening just has to kind of self-reflect into their own self-awareness and understand how they can overcome it. But here's what I do. I stop and I just balance myself. And I literally just find a quiet place and I talk to God. I'm a spiritual guy. And I pray about it, and I vision the future for like where we can go versus like what's happening in the moment in terms of like a trial. And then what I do is like, I just reflect on all the really great things that I never thought would happen up until this point.
Mhm.
And I recount those in my mind. And I keep thinking like, what would have happened if you gave up or didn't push through or just felt stuck? None of these other great things were going to happen. So this is just another one of those moments where you're stuck. That's okay. Embrace being stuck, acknowledge it, feel it, but then try and figure out a solution for it, right? And then I think the flip side of that question is like, what if you're stuck and you have an idea and just don't know where to go, right? And you don't know where to take something. Go ask people, ask your peers, ask your family, ask people you respect from other lines of business, like, what would you do? And it doesn't mean that you do what they say, but it starts the brainstorming process and it gets your energy going, it gets your juice going. And it's like, okay, all right, I've got all this different feedback, but of all that feedback and mentorship, what do I feel like I need to do? And then you just push through. Like I was talking about taking a baby step, even if you don't know what direction, get a milestone chart, figure out what that next thing is you have to accomplish to get you out of that mud pit, stuck, and then put all your energy on that. And then you just get out. You get out of the mud pit. Then you figure out what's next and you figure out what's next. But you have to just act on things. And some of them might be mistakes. Some of them might be failures. But the only way you get out of that place of being stuck, I think, is training your mind, right? And then putting it in overdrive from an action standpoint. You might back up. You might get unstuck by going backwards. That happens a lot. But you get out from being stuck and then you go right around that mud pit and you're back on the right track.
Powerful stuff, man. I'm telling you, I'm juiced. I'm pumped up. Every day is a fresh, clean, new slate. The second you wake up, just own the day. Make a plan. Listen to him, guys. This guy knows what he's talking about. Make a plan and act. It doesn't mean that when you act, everything will be perfect. And when it fails, fail again and again and again and get back up. And eventually you'll find your stride. And does it get easier? To some extent, yes. To other deeper extents, no. If you keep taking on new ventures and you keep pushing forward, it gets easier in one aspect because you start to grow your base. But the more you take on stuff, it gets harder and stuff like that. But it's the harder things are, the more rewarding things are. And we know that's just how life is.
I love that saying. And it's so true because, I mean, at this point in my career, or in my entrepreneurial journey, things have never been harder. But the things that come out of it that are like big wins, they've never been better, right?
Sure.
But I kind of want to share a personal story, and I'm going to share it just because I feel like I want to put some real context for anyone watching or viewing as an entrepreneur about failure. And I want to share a story about failure and somebody that actually was a mentor and didn't know it. So I wound up meeting Maury Eskandani out of the blue backstage during a WPT TV taping when I was literally dropping off RFID cards. And the person I was looking for wasn't there. He was. And it was the first time we ever met. And I'm like, this Maury Eskandani, like the Maury Eskandani, is this really him? And we're talking and he was asking me a bunch of questions about the company and et cetera. Before I could call him, he called me about wanting to do custom RFID cards for PokerGo. And I share this with everybody because we failed on our first attempt. We failed in a couple ways. I should have pushed back on what I knew was risky with card back design because we used 4 colors on the card back design, which can lead to some inconsistencies in color variation, which, as you know, Sean, is really important for security, like the most important thing for security.
100%.
And when the cards arrived, not only did 70% of the cards get damaged in shipment, which you can't control, but then there was too much color card back variation. And Maury and I talked about it, and it was like this empty pit in the bottom of my stomach. Like, oh my God, one of the biggest RFID customers we could have in the industry, I just completely failed.
The dream is over.
This is we're done. Like, we're done. Like, crap. And Maury was unbelievable. And he's an entrepreneur himself, and I think we need to have him on. But he was like, look, this thing's happened. The cards that we have are unbelievable quality. Like, they work better than anything we've had. They look better on the front. They're going to be great from production. It's just this cosmetic thing we got to fix. I'm like, all right. So took accountability. We fixed it, right? We fixed it. We did it. Number 2, all the cards get to the Aria. Everything's great. Unbelievable feedback from you and Paul and Maury and you name it. And we did it. All right. We overcame it. And then all of a sudden it was like, ooh, we found this one little thing on like a jack and another thing on like a 7. And it was the most minor little thing. It was only on like 20% of the cards, right? But it was something. And because Aria takes security so highly, as you should, and these things happen with print, right? Got a call after like 2 days of celebrating. All right, here's the issue. Again, just pit in my stomach, like, oh no. Really, again? Like, and it was much minor, but it was just like failure. It was failure. And on the phone with Maury again, and all the ways he could have reacted, here's what he said. Tom, it's all good. Cards are great quality. And honestly, these days it's not uncommon to run it 3 times in poker. That was his thing. He's like, it's not uncommon to run it 3 times. And then went back to the drawing board, got it fixed, bang. Now, Faded Spade cards are all over Poker Go, Super High Roller Bowl, Poker Masters, US Poker Open, you name it. That wouldn't have happened without staying strong through failure and without having somebody supporting you through failure. And I share that with people, and maybe there's some, I believe in transparency, and I don't think there's anything ashamed with what I just said, but that's a true story. And, it's an example of failure leads to success. And you need people around you who are going to support you and believe in your product and believe in you.
You bring up Maury Eskandani, and he obviously holds a dear place in, close to me and in my heart. I actually call him Uncle Maury. Mm-hmm. And those of us that are very close to him call him Uncle Maury. He's been called Uncle Maury for years. And I have some conversations with him that I can't reveal here or to anyone, to be honest, where he's pulled me aside and given me some great life and gaming advice. If he ever saw me, he thought I was steering the wrong way or anything, he brought me back onto the path that he knows has been successful for him and others in the industry as leaders throughout the years. So I having a guy like that to tell you, hey, don't sweat it. Running it 3 times is, that's huge. And that's kudos to you for having a guy like that pull you aside, because that just, Maury doesn't blow smoke at people's ass. He cares about you, and if he cares about you, he'll tell you how it is. Like, it sounds like he really appreciates what you do, and the reason why he does is because he recognizes you as an entrepreneur, and that you really want to make these cards for poker players, by poker players, and really grow the industry in your way. And if everybody took their little avenue, their little, it's not little to them, of course, but their little lane that they're in, and grow it, it only compounds more and more. And that kind of circles back to what we were talking earlier, where, ambassadors can grow the game in their own way. It doesn't have to be this huge monumental thing. It just has to be what they do. And yeah, it's really great.
And isn't it interesting that it was a customer that provided that type of like mentorship, right? But that speaks volumes about our poker industry. There's a ton of support that goes around this poker industry. And I think the other thing that came out of that failure was, without it, the cards wouldn't be what they are for all of our now customers, like WPT, HPT, Live at the Bike, Best Bet Live, Triton. I'm leaving a bunch of people out. We haven't had those issues since then because we learned from it, right? Now, will we have them again in the future? Absolutely. It's going to happen. Sure. But when it happens, how do you handle it, right? Do you handle it with belief and confidence and class and integrity and make it right? And that's what I want Faded Spade to be known for. High quality, great brand, does business the right way. And you know what? If and when there are issues, which are going to happen in any business, it's handled the right way with integrity. So I think that's important for entrepreneurs to hear too.
Awesome stuff. All right, Tom, I got one more question for you.
Because we probably bored everybody to this point. So
this one's kind of a real broad question, and it really focuses in on Tom Wheaton himself. But what is next? What do you have in store for you? And what's next for Faded Spade? And personally, what's next for Tom Wheaton?
So I'll start with Faded Spade, right? So I think that we're going to continue to grow our consumer card business through our partnerships. Really happy with our consumer sales on fadedspade.com. We're going to continue to try and grow into the poker room business. We've got some awesome customers. There are some barriers there with state regulations in certain states, but we're going to push through them. We're going to overcome the barriers, and we're going to build our market share in the poker room business. I think what needs to happen is I think we're going to be expanding digitally. I think there's a lot that can happen with the brand now in the digital realm in terms of licensing and working with maybe digital poker organizations. I also think that there's opportunity deeper in the industry when it comes to content and entertainment and playing a role in that in some capacity. So you're going to see a lot of different things from Faded Spade. Some people might be like, oh, but they're a card company. Why are they getting involved in that? And I want to remind people, like, cards are our product. We are what we were becoming known for, and this is what we're trying to be the best in. But the Faded Spade brand is going to evolve to deepen, obviously, our card product, but then also expand into other spaces. And that's something that entrepreneurs should hear. Like, where you start doesn't need to be where you finish. Make sure you're constantly thinking about how to adapt to your surroundings and other opportunities within your environment to grow the business, right? So I think that's next for Faded Spade. You'll see some really cool partnerships on the digital side coming out. For me, like, I'm just going to keep at it, man. Like, I'm going to try and continue to be the best dad I can be, the best husband I can be. Like, I want my kids to be able to learn through example of what I'm doing so that they don't feel like they have to have their career and corporate path like mapped out for them, that they can actually build something and follow a dream and a passion. Like, that's important to me. So I'm going to do my best to be the best dad I can be, best husband I can be. I'm going to try and play a lot more poker tournaments, through U-Stake, especially when it's a 10K, but I'm probably going to do less 10Ks and try and do more like 1500s in there. Just because I'll get to play a lot more. Right. So, that's it for me. I'm just going to continue to try and be the best business owner I can be, person I can be, dad I can be, husband I can be, friend I can be, son I could be, brother I could be. But Faded Spade is like, we're going to adapt and evolve into certain areas. People are going to be like, what? And hey, maybe this podcast is an example of that.
Awesome. Yeah, you bring up, I want to highlight one thing that you brought up. You said that you're going to evolve into realms that people were going to look at you like, why? They're a card playing company. And the one I always think back on, like, why you should always evolve, even if you think it won't work or it might be a failure. Take Blockbuster Video. Blockbuster at one point, I don't remember what the offering price was, but Blockbuster could have owned Netflix. Just let that sink in for 1 second. That's one of those mind-blowing ones where they were like, nah, we're cool, we'll be fine. And I believe there's like one store left in Alaska right now for Blockbuster. I think they even tried to go the Redbox/Netflix route. And of course, you can't come into the race third, fourth, fifth with an idea that and hope to grow a brand. Not that you can't get into a race late and improve a brand. Of course you can, but I really appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for being on your show today.
It's been a pleasure, Sean. You are an excellent interviewer. I hope that when I do my interviews with other entrepreneurs, it's of the same level, but we'll see. We're all new at this, right? Like, this is our second podcast ever. And I feel like and it's still a pilot. We're just getting our stride.
Absolutely. And before we go, I want to give a shout out to this mop on my head that I need to get. Don't be jealous. Don't be jealous. Like you said, I'm going to lose it any day now. I want to give a shout out to Death Wish Coffee. And I'm not big on plugging things, but that's what I've been drinking here. My favorite Philadelphia mug here, Go freedom. #America. But, Death Wish Coffee, they sent me this hat and I'm drinking their coffee. It is the absolute best coffee in the world. And I don't think I could get through these interviews with you without some Death Wish coffee.
If somebody would have put money on that you were the first person to actually promote some type of product on the show, I think everybody would have put their money on me, right?
Really? I think I was the lock.
But 100%. I mean, what's so cool about the way we're doing this podcast too is, yes, hey, like I got to try some of that coffee. If it's got your blessing, then I need to try it because I need it. But we're gonna make this, I think in terms of like sponsorship eventually and et cetera, there will be opportunities to sponsor segments, to sponsor the show, et cetera, depending upon how much we grow this thing. But by no means is that our end goal here. Like our end goal is still to be able to share these types of stories with the poker community, to share them with entrepreneurs and career folks outside the industry, even for any type of education or motivation or just relatability. Just because I feel like, we're all kind of in this thing together. And when you're able to offer some kind of advice through examples, just to help somebody along, if we get one person every show that actually is able to take something we talk about and apply it to their life or their career or their business, like that's a win for us. It really is,
100%. Yeah. Obviously everybody wants personal growth but with the podcast, my personal growth, like you said, is getting this information out to the masses, and hopefully it touches someone and someone takes something from this, or even from some of our guests, from letting them tell their story and someone takes something from that. Because at the end of the day, guys, I'm telling you, we're all human. We all put our pants on one leg at a time and everything like that. There isn't this massive blueprint of how to be successful. It's just drive. At the end of the day, it's just drive. And, I see a lot of that in you, Tom, and that's why I took a chance on you. And I think that's why a lot of people have taken a chance on you. So
thanks,
yeah. Thank you.
All right. So that is wrapping up the pilot episode 2 of the Faded Spade podcast. For Sean McCormack, I'm Tom Wheaton. Next episode, we're going to have Matt Berkey on to share his Solve for Why entrepreneurial story and a whole lot more coming up after that. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. And we will see you in the non-pilot first official episode 3 of the Faded Spade podcast.
See you guys.
The Faded Spade Podcast is sponsored by Duck Duck Productions. Contact them for all of your podcast editing needs at randy@duckduckpro.com.